This video is about a topic that is very important to me. On a day like this, these solar panels are producing 10 watts of energy each. But the real potential of a sky like this is actually that the solar panels should produce about 70 to 80 watt. The first topic is about what is the world's need for my technology.
This technology is about going from sunshine to daylight in energy from photovoltaic renewable power.
This is a cold February morning. The sun is up in about 5 minutes. But you can see there's still a lot of light here in the city of Vedbæk. Look at the light. When you're using silicone as a source for collecting electricity from photoelectric effect, there should be plenty of opportunity to creating electricity on a morning like this. But that's not the case with solar cells, because they are made in the wrong way.
It is essential to move to a world that doesn't use fossil fuel at all. So, if we look at energy situation in February 2023 in Denmark, we can see that there is big holes where renewable energy is insufficient. Notice that a big part of the renewable energy comes from biofuel, which are produced by using fossil fuel. More of this in another video. February is only the fourth darkest month of the year, so in a world that doesn't run on fossil fuel, the Danish civilization should be able to powered by energy that comes directly from nature. Today the options are solar or wind power. To expand with wind power is a little bit complicated because there already are good amount of windmills in Denmark on land, and setting up new windmills I'm hit with massive protesters. The Danish population is basically okay with windmills as long as it's long way from where they live. Expanding which offshore windmills is a possibility, but it is expensive and requires a lot of time to establish. There is around 7,000 acres installed solar cells in Denmark, including what is placed on buildings. And this is clearly not enough to run the civilization. There is also some protesters against solar farms, but they are significant minor compared to windmills. By minimizing food production is not unrealistic that the amount of solar farm in a few years can be increased to 20,000 acres, but that will clearly not be enough. With the introduction of daylight utility stones, is it possible to make a totally change of game? Daylight utility stones are far less dependent on pointing towards the sun and can be placed on infrastructure and will produce an okay amount of power as long as that surface is exposed to daylight.
There are a lot of advantages by placing rooftop over infrastructure. You will have a far less maintenance on roads and power cables, and it will also be much more safer to drive bicycles in the wintertime.
By optimizing some infrastructure, by placing a daylight utility stones rooftop on it, will it easily be possible to integrate 18,000 acres of daylight utility stones into the Danish energy grid.
I have done some calculations what it will mean to have 18,000 of acres into the Danish grid system. And as you see, it almost means that we can be self-supplying with renewable energy here in February month, and it can be self-supplied about the 9th and so on, even if it's grey weather and the sun doesn't shine. I have done the calculations in a form that It's gray weather. It's the average weather where the sun doesn't shine. So if there comes a situation with thunderclouds, snow weather and very bad weather, that will change the game and cannot be reliable on renewable energy from daylight utility stones. But that's where we have the biofuel for backup. The second part is about why this invention is so much better than solar cells. When you look at solar cells in grey weather, it's very clear what is the problem. They have almost a perfect reflection of the sky in them. That means all that has been reflected will not be turned into energy. Each time a solar cell doesn't have this direct angle of incidence, the effect gets lower. The efficiency from solar cells in grey weather is kind of bad because the radiation comes from the whole sky. When they are turning towards the sun, they actually have a pretty good efficiency.
This constant shift between good and bad performance makes it very difficult to build a civilization. It will be much easier to have a stable renewable energy source that can deliver a big amount of energy directly from nature. The daylight utility stones can be that essential energy source. Solar cells are normally made with a silver contact system on the top of the cell. They remove electrons from the silicon and a contact system on the backside. They are adding electrons through the silicon. This construction gives the surface of a solar cell many tasks to perform. All these many tasks make it technically impossible to make a good surface. The daylight utility stone has its contact on the backside, which gives the possibility to make a much better surface that only shall do two things: capture the light into the silicon and shield the surface. The perfect surface solution for silicon there is used to make photovoltaic effect from daylight is a diamond surface. A diamond surface will capture almost all light into the silicon, also from a crooked angles. Another advantage with a diamond surface is that it keeps the created electricity inside the silicone. This will have a very positive effect on the efficiency.
The third part will be about how cheap it is to be manufacturing.
The daylight utility stones is based on photovoltaics and silicon. Therefore, is silicon the central element in the manufacturing process. So it all started with a silicon wafer. Opposite solar cells, there are based on polished silicon, are daylight utility stones based on unpolished silicon, which lowers the cost significant. The most significant game-changing effects is the diamond surface. This is created from methane gas, where the hydrogen is stripped off and a carbon atom connects to the silicon. This process is very similar to a galvanic process and are making use of an electric current to connect the carbon atom on the silicon.
Creating solid diamond from methane gas is something that happens a lot all over the universe. But one element that makes it very difficult is the presence of oxygen. Creating diamond has become so cheap that diamond mine has closed all over the world. With daylight utility stones you have the advantage that you are laying a diamond surface on a silicon surface, and silicon actually has a diamond structure, and that make it far more easier. When you are building up material atom by atom, they will be in the crystallized form as the bulk material you are laying the material on, and that make it a little bit hard normally to make diamond surface because there's not so many diamond structure material. silicone is exception. So that makes the process far cheaper to manufacture because they are fitting together. That's also why it's such a perfect surface to silicone.
On the backside creates a negative and a positive electric contact systems. They are isolating from each other by using a mold of sands. The process is very similar to baking. Everything is created by heating up from the silicon side. After heating is it also cooled from the silicon side and pressure from the top. These three simple steps create a whole series of processes, which creating the backside of the daylight utility stone in one operation. The negative charged contact system is created by using aluminum placed in the sand mold. The heating makes the aluminum melt and a small amount of it will start to fuse into the silicon. The aluminum melt will also dissolve a little my amount of the silicon wafer, but that is not much and the results is more like a polishing process. Because the aluminum melt is cooled from the silicon side, will the electric conductivity of the aluminum still be high? The positive charged contact system is created in holes. In this holes there is placed phosphorus pentoxide powder. This will turn into gas when it's heated. The oxygen start reacting with the aluminum and the silicon. This release the phosphor there can diffuse into the silicon. Even though the temperature of the silicon is 300 degrees over the melting point of aluminum, will the top layer of the aluminum not fall down in the hole? Because it's very hard to heat up aluminum with radiation heat, and the creative aluminum oxide layer will also stabilize the top layer. At the end of the operation will the top layer be pushed down in the hole. The building up layer of silicon oxide prevent the aluminum for diffusing into the silicon. The hot aluminum will make the silicon oxide quick and creating a material. They are known to have a very high electrical conductivity. A little bit of metallic calcium turns the sand mode into a stone-like material, doing the heating process. It is also metallic calcium. They are creating a solid interface between silicon and the now created stone material. Basically, the production involves a lot of technical processes. But everything is done in two operations. They handle all the processes.
So basically, this is a very simple and primitive way to produce a lot of alternative energy.
The final product is a stone material with a diamond surface and two electric contact systems in the back.
So basically, the whole manufacturing is a combination of small elements, small simple elements that are working together in a bigger context. When you're doing the production like this, it's very important to have the detail right. The fourth part of the video is about answering some of the criticism I have been having for this product. Hi, it's me. I'm the problem. Everybody agree. When you are developing the future technology, it's very important that using people that are very bright and intelligent. So when you're working with this new photoelectric effect, it's very important that you are keeping up with the latest fashion. Like silicone, that's yesterday's. We have moved so much past it. These daylight utility stone has been my life. It's on top of my mind. By the way, the Earth cluster is almost 28% silicon, so we really shall not use that material because that can actually solve the problem by the energy crisis. So I'm not welcome in the club of the smart and intelligent people because in the category as a dumbass, I guess. The daylight utility stones give the opportunity to create a society that is not independent of fossil fuels. Here is 3 examples of how this specific can be done.
Part 5. Examples of practical independence. With daylight utility stones. The daylight utility stones give the opportunity to start the independence off fossil fuel. First example, independence in a normal household. An average household are using between 15,000 to 22,000 kilowatt hours annually, but in the most case will it be possible to reduce that to 12,000 kilowatt hours. If the whole roof is covered in daylight utility stones, will the house produce 28,000 to 40,000 kilowatt hours annually when there is daylight? But the house is using the most energy when there is no daylight. Like in the winter where the amount of daylight is very limited. Therefore, is there a need for energy storage? Because it takes energy to storage energy, will the house need around 18,000 kilowatts in reality, if it shall be independent? This means that the house now can be an energy provider instead of our energy user for the civilization. Second example, more direct energy into cars. Cars and trucks are runs on energy there has been storage. In a world that run on 100% renewable energy, does that mean that they are running with about 40% efficiency, because it costs energy to storage energy? This is why it's such a good idea to connect renewable energy directly into cars and trucks. This obvious good idea has a long history going back to 1955, but has not been a success. The reason for this is that the solar cells has a poorly performance on a car. Because the main light that hit them are diffused light and come from a crooked angle. The daylight utility stones can change the game on this practice. A BMW 3 hybrid car, a good but normal car. Putting daylight utility stones on the top surface gives the car direct energy from daylight. This gives free kilometers every day and means that the car will refuel about 30% less. The example is calculated for a car in Central Europe and assume that it is placed 30% in shade. The third example, making steel with renewable energy. The green transition is basically a joke if it cannot provide energy to the foundation of civilization, and steel is central element for civilization on Earth. Once Denmark made steel from scrap metal in the city of Frederiksværk. Now they're hot stove casting steel and are only rolling steel in Frederiksværk. This is due to political pressure, because so-called green politician wants to lower consumption of fossil fuel locally in Denmark. But of course, this has raised totally global consumption of fossil fuel and have made it more difficult to recycling steel and iron in Denmark. If the casting of steel shall restart with renewable energy, it will require stable supply of 650 megawatts. If 80% of the year-round house and 70% of the summer houses choose to be an energy independent with daylight utility stones, they can contribute good in summer season. But 650 megawatts is a lot of power, so it will also be necessary to build infrastructure that are covered with daylight utility stones. Maybe it will be a good idea to have all year, all-weather cycling roads also covered with daylight utility stones. This will also have a good potential to save some fuel for transport. If 8% of the area around Frederiksværk is used to harvest energy from daylight, will it be possible to get independent of fossil fuel and cast steel from the 15 March to October 1st?
So this was my presentation of my invention, the daylight utility stones. They can provide energy independence to the world. Hope you will like and subscribe this video, and maybe we can bring the technology to life.